The needles clicked softly in Gwendolyn Rose's hands as dust danced in the afternoon light streaming through the windows of her small cabin. The year was 1876, and in the small frontier town of Silverhill, Colorado Territory, she was known as that strange Rose girl, the one who chose threads over teapots, weaving over wifely duties. At 22, she should have been married with at least 2 children by now, according to the gossips at the general store. Instead, her nimble fingers created the most exquisite tapestries the territory had ever seen, though few appreciated them for what they were. Gwendolyn. Her Aunt Martha's sharp voice cut through her concentration. "Are you still at that loom? Mrs. Parker's dinner is tonight, and you haven't practiced your biscuits," Gwendolyn sighed, setting aside the vibrant tapestry depicting the mountain landscape that surrounded their town. "Aunt Martha, my biscuits are perfectly fine. I made them yesterday." "Fine isn't good enough for a woman looking to find a husband," Martha huffed, her graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. "That Patterson boy will be there tonight. His father owns half the cattle in the county." "Edgar Patterson has the personality of a fence post," Gwendolyn muttered, running her fingers over the soft, colorful threads of her creation. "A fence post with money is better than a beautiful tapestry for keeping you warm at night," her aunt retorted. "Your mother, God rest her soul, would be beside herself seeing you waste your time on these crafts." The mention of her mother stung, as it always did. 3 years had passed since the fever took both her parents, leaving her in the care of her father's sister, who had traveled all the way from Boston to civilize her frontier niece. "My mother taught me to weave," Gwendolyn said quietly. "She said it was the way our family women had always expressed themselves." Martha sighed, her expression softening slightly. "Your mother had a husband, child. She earned her frivolities. Now come along, those biscuits won't make themselves." As her aunt left the room, Gwendolyn ran her palm over the half-finished scene. The mountains rose majestically, captured in threads of blue, purple, and gray. The sky was taking shape in vibrant oranges and pinks, mimicking the sunset she'd watched from her window for weeks. She had sold only 3 of her pieces since her parents' passing to a traveling businessman, who said they reminded him of paintings he'd seen in New York, and one to the wife of the mine owner, who had hidden it away in her private sitting room after her husband called it a waste of good thread. With reluctance, Gwendolyn covered her work and headed to the kitchen. Tonight would be another evening of uncomfortable corsets, stilted conversation, and not-so-subtle hints about her lacking domestic skills. She wondered, not for the first time, if there was anywhere in this vast, wild country where a woman could weave her stories without shame. The Parker dinner was exactly as Gwendolyn had expected. Ladies in their finest frontier fashions circled like well-dressed vultures, whispering behind fans and gloved hands. The men discussed cattle prices, the railroad's progress, and the perpetual threat of bandit gangs that still plagued the territory. "Miss Rose," Mrs. Wilson said, cornering her by the punch bowl, "I heard you're still at that weaving. Shouldn't you be focusing on more practical skills?" Before Gwendolyn could respond, Mrs. Parker joined them, her plump face alight with gossip. "My husband says he saw the most peculiar thing in town today. A stranger rode in looking like he'd traveled 1,000 miles. Handsome fellow if a bit rough around the edges." "A drifter," Mrs. Wilson's nose wrinkled with distaste. "Not just any drifter," Mrs. Parker lowered her voice. "My herald said he had the look of one of those Texas Rangers about him, dangerous sort, but carrying himself like a gentleman." Gwendolyn's interest was piqued despite herself. Silverhill rarely saw newcomers, especially not in the middle of October when winter threatened the mountain passes. "Did your husband mention his name?" she asked, immediately regretting drawing attention to herself. Mrs. Parker raised an eyebrow. "Why Gwendolyn Rose? I don't think it proper for young ladies to be interested in strange men." "I merely asked his name," Gwendolyn said, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Dawson, I believe, Hunter Dawson." The name lingered in Gwendolyn's mind throughout the evening, even as Edgar Patterson droned on about his father's newest bull and how a woman's place was in the home, preferably his home, if she were interested. She wasn't. It was nearly 9 when Gwendolyn finally escaped the dinner, pleading a headache. Aunt Martha had elected to stay longer, no doubt to continue singing her niece's non-existent praises to potential suitors. The night air was crisp with the promise of winter as Gwendolyn walked the short distance to their cabin, the moon lighting her path. She had just turned onto Cedar Street when she heard hoofbeats behind her. Instinctively, she stepped to the side of the dirt road, keeping her eyes downcast as was proper for a lady when encountered by strangers after dark. The rider slowed, and Gwendolyn felt his gaze upon her. She risked a glance upward. The moonlight carved shadows across features that might have been carved from the mountains themselves. Strong jaw, straight nose, eyes that seemed to absorb the darkness rather than reflect it. His hat was pulled low, but she could see dark hair curling slightly at his collar. He sat easy in the saddle of a magnificent black stallion, like a man born to ride. "Evening, madam," he said, his voice deep and smooth as river stones. "Not safe for a lady to be walking alone this time of night." "I'm nearly home, sir," Gwendolyn replied, gesturing toward the cabin just visible down the street. "But thank you for your concern." The stranger studied her for a moment longer than was comfortable. "Hunter Dawson," he finally said, "new to these parts." So this was the Texas Ranger that had the town talking. Up close, she could see why. There was something about him that spoke of wide open spaces and dangers faced and overcome. "Gwendolyn Rose," she responded with a small nod. "Miss Rose." He tipped his hat. "May I escort you the rest of the way?" Propriety demanded she refuse. A respectable woman didn't accept rides from strange men, no matter how intriguing, but something in his steady gaze made her trust him. "That's very kind, Mr. Dawson." He extended a hand, and she took it, surprised by the calluses that spoke of hard work and by the gentleness with which he helped her up behind him. She hesitated only briefly before placing her hands lightly on his waist. "Hold tight," he advised, and then they were moving, the distance to her cabin covered in mere seconds. When they arrived, he dismounted first, then offered his hands to help her down. For a brief moment they stood close, his hands at her waist, hers on his shoulders. Gwendolyn could smell leather and pine and something else uniquely him. "Thank you," she said, stepping back quickly. "My pleasure, Miss Rose." He tipped his hat again. "I hope to see you again." As he rode away, Gwendolyn stood watching until he disappeared into the darkness. She had met many men since coming-of-age sons of ranchers, shopkeepers, even a banker's nephew from Denver once, but none had made her pulse quicken like this stranger with his quiet confidence and eyes that seemed to see right through her. Inside, she lit the lamp and went straight to her loom, suddenly inspired. Her fingers moved with renewed energy, adding a deep midnight blue to the sky of her tapestry. It was the exact color of Hunter Dawson's eyes. Morning brought the usual routine. Gwendolyn rose early to help with breakfast before Aunt Martha left to teach at the small schoolhouse. Once alone, she spent the morning working on her latest weaving, fingers flying as the landscape took shape. She'd added a lone rider on a black horse, small but distinct against the mountain backdrop. By noon, she needed to replenish her thread supply. The general store doubled as the post office and the center of town gossip, and Gwendolyn usually avoided it when possible. Today, however, necessity drove her steps down the dusty main street. The bell above the door jingled as she entered Thompson's general store. Mr. Thompson himself stood behind the counter, deep in conversation with a customer whose broad shoulders and dark hat she recognized immediately. "Morning, Miss Rose," Mr. Thompson called out. "What can I help you with today?" Hunter Dawson turned, his blue eyes finding hers. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by something that might have been pleasure. "Miss Rose," he said with a slight bow, "good to see you again." "Mr. Dawson," she nodded, suddenly conscious of her simple blue dress and the few wayward curls that had escaped her practical bun. "I was just telling Mr. Dawson here about our little town," Thompson said. "He's looking to settle nearby, perhaps start a ranch of his own." "Is that so?" Gwendolyn found herself genuinely interested. "What brings you to Silverhill specifically, Mr. Dawson? We're rather out of the way." A smile touched his lips, softening the hard planes of his face. "I've had my fill of busy places. Thought I might try somewhere quieter, somewhere with a view worth waking up to every morning." There was something in the way he said it, looking directly at her, that made Gwendolyn's cheeks warm. "The mountains are certainly beautiful," she managed. "Among other sights," he agreed. Mr. Thompson tells me you're an artist of sorts. Gwendolyn shot a surprised look at the shopkeeper, who shrugged. I mentioned those fancy weavings of yours. Mr. Dawson here was asking about local crafts. I wouldn't call myself an artist, she said quickly. It's just a hobby. Now don't be modest, Miss Rose, Thompson interjected. Those tapestries of yours are something special. My wife still talks about the one you made of the wildflower meadow in spring. Hunter's interest seemed genuine. I'd like to see your work sometime if that wouldn't be too forward. Before Gwendolyn could respond, the door opened again, and Mrs. Wilson entered with her daughter Beatrice in tow. Their eyes widened at the sight of Gwendolyn talking with the handsome stranger. Miss Rose, Mrs. Wilson said with a tight smile, out for supplies. I do hope you're stocking up on flour and sugar. I hear your biscuits at the Parker dinner were a trifle dense. The deliberate barb stung, especially in front of Hunter. Actually, I'm here for thread, Gwendolyn replied, lifting her chin slightly, for my weaving. Mrs. Wilson's expression soured further. Still wasting time on those childish crafts. Dear me, your aunt must be at her wit's end. A woman your age should be perfecting her household skills, not playing with colored string. I find there's nothing childish about creating beauty. Hunter Dawson's voice cut through the tension, his tone pleasant but firm. Some of the finest art I've seen came from looms in Europe and back east. Mrs. Wilson blinked, clearly not expecting the stranger to contradict her. Well, Mr. Dawson, Hunter Dawson, madam, Mr. Dawson, she continued, recovering quickly. Perhaps things are different where you come from, but here in Silverhill, we value practical skills in our young ladies. Cooking, sewing clothes, managing a household, these are what make a woman marriageable. Is that so? Hunter's expression remained neutral, but Gwendolyn detected a hint of challenge in his voice. In my experience, true value isn't found in following expectations, but in the courage to pursue one's talents. An uncomfortable silence fell over the store. Beatrice Wilson looked scandalized, her mother affronted. Mr. Thompson busied himself with rearranging items on a shelf, clearly wanting no part in the confrontation. I should be going, Gwendolyn said quickly. Mr. Thompson, I'll return another time for my thread. Nonsense, Hunter said. Mrs. Wilson, I believe you had business with Mr. Thompson. Please don't let us keep you. The dismissal was polite but unmistakable. Mrs. Wilson's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water before she gathered her dignity and marched to the counter, dragging her daughter along. Hunter turned to Gwendolyn. Now, about that thread you needed. 10 minutes later, they exited the store together, Gwendolyn clutching a paper package of various colored threads. The encounter had left her flustered but oddly exhilarated. No one had ever defended her weaving before, certainly not a man and definitely not a stranger. Thank you, she said as they paused outside the store. You didn't have to do that, Hunter shrugged. I don't much care for people who tear others down to make themselves feel important. Even so, you've probably just made an enemy of Mrs. Wilson, which isn't ideal if you're planning to settle here. His smile was slow and genuine. I reckon I'll survive. They stood in companionable silence for a moment before Gwendolyn gathered her courage. Would you like to see some of my work? Not today, of course, but perhaps tomorrow. My aunt will be at the school until late afternoon. The invitation was improper, and they both knew it. A respectable woman didn't invite a man to her home without a chaperone. But something about Hunter Dawson made conventional rules seem less important. I'd be honored, he said, his eyes never leaving hers. Say 2 o'clock, Gwendolyn nodded. 2 o'clock. As she walked home, her package of thread clutched to her chest, Gwendolyn felt lighter than she had in years. For the first time since her parents died, someone had seen value in her art. Not just seen it, but defended it publicly. She spent the rest of the day in a flurry of activity, weaving with renewed purpose. The landscape expanded, details emerging with each pass of the shuttle. The lone rider now stood on a ridge, surveying the valley below. As her fingers worked, Gwendolyn found herself humming a tune her mother used to sing, one she hadn't remembered in years. The next morning, she woke early and cleaned the cabin from top to bottom. She arranged her finished pieces around the small sitting room and positioned her current work on the loom where the light hit it best. She even baked a batch of scones, determined to prove she wasn't completely lacking in domestic skills. At 1:30, panic set in. What was she thinking, inviting a man she barely knew to her home? What would people say if they found out? What would Aunt Martha do? By 1:45, she had changed her dress 3 times, finally settling on a deep green that her mother had always said brought out the gold flecks in her brown eyes. She pinned her hair up neatly, but left a few curls framing her face, then immediately wondered if that was too forward. The knock came precisely at 2 o'clock. Gwendolyn took a deep breath, smoothed her skirts, and opened the door. Hunter Dawson stood on her porch, hat in hand, looking like he'd stepped out of one of her own woven fantasies. He'd cleaned up since yesterday, his dark hair neatly combed, his shirt crisp. He held a small bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers. "Miss Rose," he said with a slight bow, "these are for you." "Thank you," she replied, taking the flowers. Their fingers brushed, sending a jolt of awareness through her. "Please come in." He stepped inside, his presence immediately making the small cabin seem even smaller. His eyes took in the room, moving from one displayed tapestry to another with genuine interest. "These are remarkable," he said, approaching a piece that depicted a sunrise over the mountains. "The way you've captured the light." Gwendolyn watched him study her work, a strange tightness in her chest. No one had ever looked at her tapestries this way before, with such focus and appreciation. "This one's my favorite," Hunter said, stopping before a piece she'd completed the previous winter. It showed a snow-covered landscape with a lone wolf standing on an outcropping, its head raised to a star-filled sky. "Mine too," she admitted. "It's the only one I've never considered selling." "I can see why." He turned to her, his blue eyes intense. "You have a gift, Miss Rose, a rare one." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight with emotion. "Would you like to see what I'm working on now?" She led him to the loom by the window where her current tapestry was taking shape. The mountains, the vibrant sky, the lone rider on the ridge, all of it suddenly seemed too revealing, as if she'd woven her own hopes into the threads. Hunter studied it carefully, his expression unreadable. "The rider," he said finally, "is that?" "Just a figure," she said quickly. "For scale, to show the vastness of the landscape." A smile touched his lips. "Of course. Would you like some tea? I made scones as well. I'd like that very much." They sat at her small kitchen table, the conversation flowing more easily than Gwendolyn had expected. Hunter told her about growing up in Texas, about his years as a ranger, about his decision to leave that life behind after too much violence and too many ghosts. "I want something different now," he said, watching her over the rim of his cup. "Something I can build with my own hands. Something peaceful. Is that why you're looking at land near Silverhill?" He nodded. "There's a parcel about 5 miles east of town, good water, decent grazing. Previous owner died without heirs, so the bank's selling it cheap." "I know the place," Gwendolyn said, "the old Harker homestead. It's beautiful land, especially in spring when the meadows fill with flowers." "You've been there," she smiled at the memory. "My father used to take me riding all over these mountains. He believed a woman should know the land as well as any man." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was." Sadness touched her briefly. "He and my mother both died 3 years ago. Fever swept through town." Hunter's expression softened. "I'm sorry. It was quick at least." She sipped her tea. "They went within days of each other. I've lived with my aunt ever since." "The one who teaches at the school," Gwendolyn nodded. "She came from Boston to civilize me. She's determined to see me properly married before she returns east." "And what do you want?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years, perhaps ever. "I want—" She hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I want to weave. I want to create beauty and have it valued for what it is. I want to wake up each morning excited about what my hands will make that day. Not marriage, children. I'm not opposed to those things," she said carefully. "But I've seen too many women disappear into their husbands' lives, their own talents and dreams forgotten. I couldn't bear that." Hunter held her gaze. "What if you found a man who valued your weaving as much as you do, who understood that your art is part of who you are?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibilities neither was ready to name. "Such men seem rare in these parts," she finally said, "perhaps not as rare as you think." The moment stretched, filled with unspoken things. Then the mantel clock chimed 3, breaking the spell. "Your aunt will be home soon," Hunter said, standing. "Yes." Gwendolyn rose as well. "Thank you for coming and for seeing my work. Thank you for sharing it with me." He reached for his hat, then paused. "Miss Rose, Gwendolyn, would you permit me to call on you again?" Properly this time, with your aunt's knowledge and approval. Her heart skipped. I would like that very much, Mr. Dawson. Hunter, he corrected gently. Please call me Hunter. Hunter, she repeated, liking the way his name felt on her lips. At the door, he took her hand and raised it to his lips, the gesture old-fashioned and oddly fitting. Until next time, Gwendolyn. She watched him walk to his horse, mount with easy grace, and ride away. Only when he disappeared from view did she close the door, leaning against it as her knees suddenly felt weak. Something had shifted in her world like the first tremor before an avalanche. Whatever came next, Gwendolyn knew nothing would be the same. True to his word, Hunter called on Gwendolyn the very next day, this time with Aunt Martha present. To Gwendolyn's surprise, her aunt seemed cautiously approving of the former Texas Ranger. At least he has ambition, Martha commented after Hunter left that evening. And he seems quite taken with you. He appreciates my weaving, Gwendolyn said, unable to keep the wonder from her voice. Martha's expression softened momentarily. Yes, well, perhaps that's not entirely a bad thing. A husband should appreciate his wife's talents even if they are unconventional. Over the next 2 weeks, Hunter became a regular visitor at the Rose cabin. He brought news of his land purchase, his plans for building a proper ranch house, the cattle he intended to raise. Each visit ended with him admiring Gwendolyn's progress on her tapestry, which was nearing completion. Word spread quickly through Silverhill about the handsome newcomer's interest in the weaving spinster, as some unkindly called her. Opinions were divided, with many of the town's matrons disapproving of Hunter's apparent encouragement of Gwendolyn's impractical hobby. I heard Mrs. Wilson telling Mrs. Parker that no good can come of a man who indulges a woman's fancies. Gwendolyn told Hunter one afternoon as they walked along the creek behind her cabin, Aunt Martha watching from the porch. She says you're giving me false ideas about a woman's proper place. Hunter's laugh was low and rich. Mrs. Wilson seems mighty concerned with everyone's proper place except her own. She's not the only one, Gwendolyn sighed. The whole town thinks I'm odd for preferring my loom to a cook stove. Let them think what they want, Hunter said, his hand finding hers. Their opinions matter about as much as last year's snow. The warmth of his palm against her sent pleasant shivers up Gwendolyn's arm. These moments, a touch of hands, a lingering glance, the brush of his shoulder against hers as they walked had become precious to her, each one a thread in a new pattern taking shape between them. There's a harvest dance at the town hall next weekend, she said. Would you like to attend? With me, I mean. His smile was answer enough, but he said the words anyway. Nothing would please me more. The night of the harvest dance arrived crisp and clear, with stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Gwendolyn wore her best dress, a deep burgundy that her mother had made for her 18th birthday. She'd altered it slightly, adding embroidery along the collar and cuffs, tiny mountains and stars, symbols of her new hope. Hunter arrived promptly at 7, looking more handsome than ever in a dark suit and crisp white shirt. His eyes widened appreciatively when she appeared. You look beautiful, he said simply. The dance was already in full swing when they arrived at the town hall. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the proceedings. A small band played lively tunes as couples twirled across the wooden floor. Their entrance caused a noticeable pause in the festivities. Conversations halted, heads turned, and whispers started. Gwendolyn felt her confidence waver under the scrutiny. Ignore them, Hunter murmured, his hand steady at the small of her back. They're just jealous I'm escorting the most beautiful woman in the territory. His words bolstered her, and she held her head high as they made their way through the crowd. Some nodded politely, others turned away. Mrs. Wilson made a show of examining Gwendolyn's dress before whispering something to her husband that made him frown in their direction. May I have this dance? Hunter asked as the band struck up a waltz. Gwendolyn had never been much of a dancer, but in Hunter's arms, she felt graceful and secure. He led with confidence, guiding her through the steps as if they'd danced together 100 times before. Everyone's watching us, she whispered, aware of the eyes following their progress around the floor. Let them watch, he replied. Maybe they'll learn something about what really matters. As the evening progressed, the initial tension eased somewhat. Mr. Thompson and his wife greeted them warmly, and even Sheriff Blackwood stopped by to welcome Hunter officially to the community. "Heard you bought the old Harker place," the sheriff said. "Good land, needs a strong hand to tame it, though." "I'm up to the challenge," Hunter replied. "I'm sure you are." The sheriff's gaze shifted to Gwendolyn. "Evening, Miss Rose, that's mighty fine needlework on your dress you're doing." Surprised by his notice and approval, Gwendolyn nodded. "Yes, thank you. My late wife used to embroider," Blackwood said, a touch of sadness in his voice. "Always said you could tell a person's character by the care they put into small details. Excuse me, folks." As he moved away, Hunter squeezed her hand. "See, not everyone in this town is blind to talent." They were enjoying a moment of respite by the refreshment table when Edgar Patterson approached, his expression sour. He'd been watching them all evening, his displeasure growing with each dance they shared. "Miss Rose," he said stiffly, "my mother was hoping you might contribute something to the church bazaar next month, perhaps some of your string pictures." The deliberate condescension in his tone made Gwendolyn bristle. "They're tapestries, Mr. Patterson, and I'd be happy to donate one for the worthy cause." Edgar's attention shifted to Hunter. "Dawson, I understand you've purchased property nearby. Rather ambitious for a man on his own, isn't it?" "I've never lacked for ambition," Hunter replied evenly. "Yes, well." Edgar straightened his waistcoat. "Ranching takes more than ambition. It takes knowledge, connections, proper standing in the community." "Is that so?" Hunter's tone remained pleasant, but Gwendolyn felt him tense beside her. "Indeed. My father always says cattle respect tradition. They know when a man doesn't belong." Before Hunter could respond, Edgar turned back to Gwendolyn. "I saved you a dance, Miss Rose. The next one, I believe." The presumption left her momentarily speechless. She had no desire to dance with Edgar Patterson, but outright refusal would cause a scene. Hunter solved her dilemma smoothly. "I'm afraid Miss Rose's dance card is full this evening, Patterson. Perhaps another time." Edgar's face flushed. "I wasn't aware frontier dances required formal bookings." "They don't," Hunter said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Just good manners." For a tense moment, Gwendolyn thought Edgar might make a scene. Instead, he gave a stiff bow and retreated, but not before saying loudly enough for nearby dancers to hear. "I suppose some men are attracted to women with unusual hobbies. Personally, I prefer a woman who knows her way around a kitchen rather than wasting time with frivolous crafts." The barb hit its mark. Whispers erupted around them, and Gwendolyn felt the weight of judgmental eyes once more. "Perhaps we should leave," she suggested quietly. Hunter's jaw was tight, but he nodded. "If that's what you want." The cool night air was a relief after the stuffy hall. They walked in silence for several minutes, Gwendolyn's arm tucked through Hunter's before he spoke. "I'm sorry about Patterson. Men like him mistake cruelty for cleverness." "It's not your fault," she said. "And it's nothing I haven't heard before." Hunter stopped walking, turning to face her in the moonlight. "It's not right the way they talk about your weaving, as if creating beauty is somehow less valuable than cooking a stew or darning socks." "That's just how it is for women here," Gwendolyn said, though the resignation in her voice felt hollow now after weeks in Hunter's company. "We're judged by our usefulness, not our artistry. It doesn't have to be that way." He took both her hands in his. "Gwendolyn, I've traveled all over this country. I've seen women doctors in cities, women running businesses, women writing books that change minds. The world is changing, even if Silverhill hasn't noticed yet." Hope flickered in her chest. "Do you really believe that?" "I do." His eyes held hers, sincere and unwavering. "And I believe in you, in your talent, your vision, your hands that create such beauty." Something in his words, in the way he looked at her, broke open a place in Gwendolyn's heart that had been carefully guarded for years. Tears welled in her eyes. "No one has ever said such things to me before," she whispered. Hunter's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb gently catching a tear as it fell. "Then everyone you've known has been a fool." In the silver moonlight, with the distant sounds of the dance fading behind them, Hunter Dawson kissed Gwendolyn Rose for the first time. It was gentle and reverent, a promise rather than a demand. When they parted, both were breathless. "I should take you home," Hunter said, his voice husky. Gwendolyn nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. They walked the rest of the way in a different kind of silence, their fingers intertwined, the space between them humming with possibility. At her door, Hunter kissed her once more, briefly but with feeling. "Good night, Gwendolyn." "Good night, Hunter." She watched him walk away, her heart too full for words. Inside, she went directly to her loom, needing to capture this feeling before it faded. Her fingers worked swiftly, adding new colors to her tapestry, the deep burgundy of her dress, the silver of moonlight on a perfect night, the particular shade of blue that was Hunter's eyes when he looked at her with tenderness. The following weeks passed in a blur of happiness for Gwendolyn. Hunter called on her almost daily, sometimes bringing small gifts, a ribbon for her hair, wildflowers from his land, once a set of exotic threads he'd ordered specially from Denver. They took long walks, talked for hours, and shared gentle kisses away from prying eyes. Aunt Martha watched their courtship with cautious approval, though she still fretted about Gwendolyn's continued devotion to her weaving. "He seems a good man," she conceded one evening after Hunter had gone. "But Gwendolyn, you must consider whether he truly understands what marriage entails. A wife has duties that leave little time for artistic pursuits." "Hunter isn't like that," Gwendolyn insisted. "He values my weaving. During courtship, perhaps, but men change once the wedding vows are spoken. Your uncle was a poet when I met him, full of romantic notions. Within a year of our marriage, he was complaining if dinner was 5 minutes late." Gwendolyn didn't argue, but she knew in her heart that Hunter was different. He had begun building his ranch house on the Harker property, and whenever he described his plans, her weaving room was always mentioned, a space with large windows facing north for the best light. November brought the first serious snow, blanketing Silverhill in white. Gwendolyn completed her mountain landscape tapestry and immediately began a new one, this time depicting Hunter's land as it would look in spring, with the cabin he was building nestled against the hillside. On a particularly cold Thursday, Gwendolyn was alone in the cabin, working at her loom while Aunt Martha attended a meeting of the Ladies' Aid Society. A knock at the door surprised her. Hunter usually didn't call on Thursdays, as he spent those days working on his house with the men he'd hired from town. Opening the door, she found not Hunter but Edgar Patterson, his face flushed either from the cold or from drink. "Mr. Patterson," she said, not bothering to hide her surprise. "What brings you here? May I come in?" he asked, swaying slightly. "It's freezing out here." Propriety demanded she refuse a man entry when she was alone, but the temperature was well below freezing. "Just for a moment," she conceded, leaving the door wide open despite the cold. Edgar stomped snow from his boots and entered, his gaze immediately falling on her loom and the half-finished tapestry. His lip curled. "Still at it, I see," he said. "Wasting your days on pretty pictures while other women contribute something useful to society." Gwendolyn's patience, never abundant where Edgar was concerned, evaporated entirely. "Mr. Patterson, I doubt you came all this way in the snow to critique my choice of occupation. What do you want?" He drew himself up, attempting dignity despite his slightly disheveled appearance. "I came to warn you, as a Christian duty, that Dawson fellow isn't what he seems." A chill that had nothing to do with the open door ran through Gwendolyn. "What do you mean?" "I've made inquiries," Edgar said, a vindictive satisfaction in his voice. "Your Texas Ranger has quite a history. Did he tell you about the men he's killed, the bounties he's collected? Did he tell you about the woman in Abilene?" "Woman?" Gwendolyn repeated, hating the uncertainty that crept into her voice. "Oh yes," Edgar pressed, seeing his advantage. "Apparently he was engaged to some saloon singer, left her at the altar, they say, rode out of town the night before the wedding and never looked back." "I don't believe you," Gwendolyn said, but doubt had taken root. Hunter spoke little of his past, always turning conversations toward the future, their future, she had thought. "Believe what you want," Edgar shrugged. "But ask yourself why a man like that would suddenly appear in Silverhill, interested in a woman most men wouldn't look twice at. Could it be your inheritance? The money your father left you that comes due on your 23rd birthday?" Shock rendered Gwendolyn momentarily speechless. Few people knew about the trust her father had established for her, to be accessible only when she turned 23 or married, whichever came first. Her birthday was just 3 months away. "How do you know about that?" she finally managed. "My father sits on the bank's board," Edgar said smugly. "Nothing financial happens in this town without his knowledge, including the fact that your Texas Ranger was nearly penniless when he arrived. The down payment on the Harker place took almost everything he had. "Get out," Gwendolyn whispered, then louder, "Get out of my house." Edgar moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. "Just remember, Miss Rose, when he breaks your heart, that some of us saw his true nature from the start. Some of us would still be willing to offer you a respectable name, despite your eccentricities." After he left, Gwendolyn closed the door and leaned against it, her mind racing. She didn't want to believe Edgar's poisonous words, but seeds of doubt had been planted. Why would a man like Hunter choose her when he could have any woman? Why had he never mentioned a fiancé in Abilene? And how had he known exactly what to say, exactly what she longed to hear about her weaving being valuable? By the time Aunt Martha returned, Gwendolyn had worked herself into a state of anxious confusion. She said nothing of Edgar's visit, not wanting to give voice to the doubts that now plagued her. That evening, when Hunter called as usual, Gwendolyn found herself watching him carefully, looking for signs of deception. He noticed her distraction immediately. "Is everything all right?" he asked as they sat before the fire, Aunt Martha discreetly busy with her knitting in the corner. "You seem troubled." "I'm fine," she lied, "just tired." Hunter studied her face. "Gwendolyn, please tell me what's wrong. Have I done something to upset you?" The genuine concern in his voice almost broke her resolve. She longed to confess Edgar's visit, to hear Hunter deny everything, to believe him without reservation. But fear held her back, fear that Edgar might be right, that she might be a fool blinded by pretty words and the first man to show appreciation for her art. "It's nothing," she insisted. "Truly." The evening passed awkwardly, with conversation stilted and Gwendolyn avoiding Hunter's touch. When he left, his goodbye was tinged with confusion and hurt. For 3 days, Gwendolyn wrestled with her doubts. She avoided Hunter, sending Aunt Martha to the door with excuses of headaches and household duties. She couldn't concentrate on her weaving, making mistakes that required hours of careful unraveling. On the 4th day, a heavy snowstorm blew in from the mountains. By nightfall, the wind howled around the cabin, rattling windows and sending drafts through every crack. Gwendolyn and her aunt huddled near the fire, sipping hot tea and listening to the storm's fury. A pounding at the door startled them both. Who on earth would be out in this weather? Aunt Martha exclaimed, rising to answer. Gwendolyn's heart leapt to her throat when Hunter burst in, snow covering his coat and hat, his face red from the cold. "Hunter, what are you doing here?" she gasped, forgetting her doubts in her concern. "I had to see you," he said, stamping snow from his boots. "You've been avoiding me, and I need to know why." Aunt Martha looked between them, sensing the tension. "I'll make more tea," she said diplomatically, retreating to the kitchen. Alone with Hunter, Gwendolyn found her resolve weakening. He looked so earnest, so worried. "Edgar Patterson came to see me," she finally admitted. "He told me things about your past." Hunter's expression darkened. "What things?" "He said you were engaged before to a woman in Abilene, that you left her just before the wedding." She swallowed hard. "He also suggested you might be interested in me because of my inheritance." Anger flashed in Hunter's eyes, followed quickly by hurt. "And you believed him?" "I don't know what to believe," Gwendolyn said, hating the tremor in her voice. "You never talk about your past. You appeared in Silverhill out of nowhere, showing interest in the one woman most men avoid. Is it so unreasonable to wonder why?" Hunter removed his hat, running a hand through his damp hair. "I've never lied to you, Gwendolyn. Yes, there was a woman in Abilene. Kate was her name. We were engaged briefly, but I broke it off when I discovered she was still seeing her former beau. I didn't leave her at the altar. I ended things properly, face to face. And my inheritance," his jaw tightened. "What inheritance? I know your parents left you this cabin and some land." "Is there more?" The genuine confusion in his voice was impossible to fake. Gwendolyn felt shame wash over her for doubting him. "My father left a trust for me," she explained. "It comes due on my 23rd birthday in February. It's not a fortune, but it's enough to live comfortably for some years." "I didn't know," Hunter said quietly. "And I don't care. I have plans for my ranch, plans that were in motion before I ever met you. I'm not a wealthy man, but I've saved enough to build something worthwhile." Gwendolyn believed him. The realization brought both relief and embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have trusted you enough to ask directly instead of listening to Edgar's insinuations." Hunter moved closer, taking her hands in his. "Why would you listen to anything that man says?" He's wanted you for himself since I arrived." "Not me," Gwendolyn corrected. "My father's name, perhaps, my mother's connections in Denver, but Edgar has made it clear he finds my weaving ridiculous, a waste of time better spent on proper wifely duties." "Then he's a bigger fool than I thought." Hunter's thumbs traced circles on her palms. "Your weaving is part of who you are, Gwendolyn. It's your voice, your vision. Anyone who truly loves you would never ask you to silence that voice." Tears sprang to her eyes at his understanding. "That's what I've always feared, that I'd have to choose between my art and having a family of my own." "You don't have to choose," Hunter said firmly. "Not with me." He released her hands only to reach into his coat pocket, withdrawing a small box. Gwendolyn's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a delicate silver ring set with a small but perfect sapphire. "I was going to wait until Christmas," he said, his voice husky with emotion, "but I can't bear another day of doubt between us." "Gwendolyn Rose, I love you, your spirit, your talent, your hands that create such beauty. Will you marry me?" Joy unlike anything she'd ever known flooded through Gwendolyn. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "yes." Hunter slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms. Their kiss was deep and passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. From the kitchen doorway, Aunt Martha cleared her throat. They broke apart, both blushing like teenagers caught behind the schoolhouse. "I take it congratulations are in order," Martha said, her stern expression belied by the moisture in her eyes. "Yes, madam," Hunter confirmed, his arm around Gwendolyn's waist, "if you'll give your blessing." Martha studied them for a long moment before nodding. "You have it. God knows my niece needs someone who understands her." Unusual qualities. It was as close to wholehearted approval as Aunt Martha was likely to give, and Gwendolyn accepted it gratefully. The storm raged on outside, but within the cabin, all was warmth and joy. When Hunter finally left after extracting a promise from Gwendolyn to visit his nearly completed house the next day, she returned to her loom with renewed purpose. Her fingers flew over the threads, weaving dreams into reality, hope into art. News of their engagement spread through Silverhill like wildfire. Reactions were mixed, with many expressing surprise that the handsome Texan had chosen the weaving spinster, when several more suitable young ladies had shown interest. Edgar Patterson made a show of publicly congratulating them while privately spreading rumors about Hunter's past and Gwendolyn's inheritance. Mrs. Wilson was particularly vocal in her disapproval. "Mark my words," she told anyone who would listen, "that marriage won't last a year. Men want wives, not artists. Once the newness wears off, he'll expect her to put away those threads and learn to keep a proper home." Such predictions might have worried Gwendolyn once, but now they rolled off her like water from oiled canvas. Hunter's love and support had given her a confidence she'd never known before. When they visited his ranch together, and he showed her the room he'd designed especially for her, weaving with windows on 3 sides for perfect light at any time of day, she knew without doubt that he truly understood what her art meant to her. They planned a Christmas wedding, small and simple. Aunt Martha would return to Boston afterward, her self-appointed mission to see Gwendolyn settled finally accomplished. 2 weeks before the wedding, Gwendolyn was in Thompson's General Store purchasing supplies when Mrs. Wilson and her daughter entered, followed by several other members of the Ladies' Aid Society. They had just come from their weekly meeting and were in high spirits until they spotted Gwendolyn. "Miss Rose," Mrs. Wilson said with a tight smile, "wedding preparations keeping you busy. I do hope you're finding time to improve your cooking. Mr. Dawson might appreciate your crafts now, but a man expects certain standards in his home." Gwendolyn had endured similar comments for weeks and usually let them pass without response. Today, however, her patience had reached its limit. "Mr. Dawson appreciates many things about me, Mrs. Wilson," she said evenly, "just as I appreciate many things about him." That's what love is, valuing the whole person, not just the parts that conform to your expectations. Mrs. Wilson's eyes narrowed. "Well, I'm only trying to help, dear. Marriage is difficult enough without entering it with unrealistic notions." "What's unrealistic about expecting respect for one's talents?" Gwendolyn countered. "Would you tell a man to give up what he loves because he's married?" "That's hardly the same thing," Mrs. Parker interjected. "A man's work supports his family. Your weaving is just a hobby." "It's more than that," came a deep voice from the doorway. Hunter stood there, snow dusting his shoulders, his blue eyes intent as he crossed to Gwendolyn's side. "It's art. It's her passion, and it will help support our family since I've arranged for her work to be sold in Denver and Santa Fe." Shock rippled through the group of women. Gwendolyn herself was stunned. Hunter had mentioned the possibility of selling her tapestries in larger markets, but she hadn't known he'd made concrete arrangements. "You can't be serious," Mrs. Wilson sputtered. "No respectable husband would encourage his wife to work." "I'm not encouraging my wife to work," Hunter corrected. "I'm supporting my wife's talent. There's a difference." "But what about your home, your meals, your future children?" Mrs. Parker asked, genuinely perplexed. "We'll manage those things together," Hunter said simply. "As partners." Mrs. Wilson's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. A wife's duty is to her husband and children, not to some frivolous craft that serves no purpose." Hunter's expression hardened. "Madam, I've respected your right to your opinions, but I'm done listening to you belittle the woman I love. Gwendolyn's hands create beauty that brings joy to anyone with eyes to see it. Her weaving tells stories that will outlast all of us. And if you can't understand that, then I pity you." He turned to Gwendolyn, his voice softening. "Are you ready to go, darling? I wanted to show you the new furniture that arrived for the house." Still stunned by his passionate defense, Gwendolyn could only nod. As Hunter helped her with her packages, Mrs. Wilson made one last attempt to salvage her position. "Mr. Dawson, I meant no offense. I'm sure Miss Rose's weaving is very nice. But surely you must agree that a wife's primary duties are to her home and family. That cooking and cleaning and raising children must come before hobbies." Hunter paused at the door, his arm around Gwendolyn's waist. For a moment, he seemed to consider his words carefully. Then he looked down at Gwendolyn with such love that her heart nearly burst. "Mrs. Wilson," he said clearly, ensuring everyone in the store could hear, "her hands already feed me. Not with bread or stew, but with beauty and passion and joy. I'd starve without those things, no matter how full my belly." The silence that followed them out of the store was profound. As they walked through the snow toward Hunter's waiting wagon, Gwendolyn felt tears freezing on her cheeks, tears of happiness, of vindication, of pure love. "Did you mean that?" she asked as he helped her onto the seat. "About selling my work in Denver and Santa Fe?" Hunter smiled, climbing up beside her. "Every word. I met a man named Charles Montgomery last month when I was in Denver picking up supplies. He owns galleries there and in Santa Fe, specializing in Western art. I showed him sketches of your tapestries, and he was immediately interested. He's coming to the wedding, partly to meet you and see your work in person." Gwendolyn could hardly believe it. "You did all this for me?" "For us," Hunter corrected, taking the reins. "Your talent shouldn't be hidden away in Silverhill, Gwendolyn. It deserves to be seen, appreciated, valued." As they drove through the snowy landscape toward Hunter's ranch, their future home, Gwendolyn felt a sense of possibility opening before her like a vast new territory waiting to be explored. For the first time in her life, she didn't have to choose between her art and love. She could have both with a man who saw her fully and loved all that he saw. "Thank you," she said, leaning her head against his shoulder, "for understanding, for defending me, for loving me as I am." Hunter's arm tightened around her. "Always," he promised. "For as long as these hands of mine can hold yours." The Christmas wedding of Hunter Dawson and Gwendolyn Rose was the talk of Silverhill for years to come. Not because of lavish decorations or extravagant displays, the ceremony at the small church was simple and elegant, but because of what hung behind the altar. A magnificent tapestry depicting two riders against a mountain backdrop, their hands joined, their faces turned toward a rising sun. Gwendolyn had worked day and night to complete it in time, pouring all her love and hope into every thread. When the townspeople saw it, even the most skeptical had to admit its beauty. Mrs. Wilson was notably silent throughout the ceremony, her tight smile never reaching her eyes. Edgar Patterson didn't attend at all, having left suddenly for Denver on urgent business. Charles Montgomery, the gallery owner from Denver, was effusive in his praise of Gwendolyn's work. Before the wedding reception ended, he had arranged to take 5 of her completed tapestries back to his gallery, with a commission for 3 more specific scenes of Western life. "You have a unique vision, Mrs. Dawson," he told her. Your work bridges traditional craft and fine art in a way I've never seen before. I believe there's a significant market for it, not just in the West, but perhaps even in New York and Europe eventually. The possibility was dizzying. As she and Hunter danced their first dance as husband and wife, Gwendolyn felt as if she were floating above the floor, buoyed by joy and possibility. "Happy, Mrs. Dawson," Hunter murmured in her ear. "Completely," she answered truthfully, "though I still can't believe all this is happening." "Believe it," he said, his blue eyes serious. "This is just the beginning." And it was. After a brief honeymoon at a hot springs resort in the mountains, Hunter and Gwendolyn settled into their new life at the ranch. Winter turned to spring, bringing new calves to their small but growing herd and new inspiration to Gwendolyn's weaving. True to his word, Hunter never expected Gwendolyn to conform to traditional expectations of a frontier wife. They shared responsibilities based on ability and preference rather than convention. Hunter proved to be a surprisingly good cook, having learned during his bachelor years, while Gwendolyn discovered she had a knack for bookkeeping and business correspondence, and her weaving thrived. The room Hunter had designed for her became her sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself for hours in the rhythm of the loom and the vibrancy of her threads. Her first pieces sold quickly in Denver, leading to more commissions and steadily increasing prices for her work. By their first anniversary, Gwendolyn's tapestries were hanging in homes as far away as San Francisco and Chicago. A small article about her work appeared in a Denver newspaper, describing her as a new voice in Western art, capturing the spirit of the frontier through an ancient medium. When Gwendolyn discovered she was expecting their first child in the summer of 1878, she feared her art might have to be set aside, at least temporarily. But Hunter was adamant that they would find a way for her to continue weaving. "Your art is part of who you are," he reminded her. "Our child should know that part of their mother, just as they'll know the rancher in their father." True to his word, Hunter hired a young widow from town to help with household duties and childcare after their daughter Helen was born. The arrangement allowed Gwendolyn time to weave, while ensuring their home ran smoothly, and their child received plenty of attention and love. As Helen grew, she often sat in Gwendolyn's weaving room, watching with wide blue eyes her father's eyes as colorful landscapes emerged from her mother's hands. By the time she was 3, she had her own small loom where she created simple but enthusiastic pieces that Hunter proudly displayed in his study. Life wasn't without challenges. Drought threatened their cattle one year, and a particularly harsh winter the next. Gwendolyn's Aunt Martha passed away unexpectedly, leaving Gwendolyn grieving the woman who, despite their differences, had genuinely wanted her happiness. And not everyone in Silverhill ever fully accepted their unconventional marriage, though the criticism grew more muted as their prosperity and contentment became evident. But through it all, their love and mutual respect only deepened. Hunter never once suggested Gwendolyn should set aside her loom for more traditional pursuits, and she in turn supported his dreams for their ranch, which grew into one of the most successful in the county. 5 years after their wedding, Gwendolyn received an invitation that changed their lives once again. Her work had been selected for exhibition at the World's Fair in Paris, alongside other American artists representing the spirit and landscape of the expanding nation. The night the letter arrived, after Helen was tucked into bed, Hunter opened a bottle of fine whiskey he'd been saving for a special occasion. They sat on the porch of their home, watching the stars emerge over the mountains that had featured in so many of Gwendolyn's tapestries. "Paris," Hunter marveled, shaking his head. "Who would have thought that girl I met in Silverhill, the one everyone underestimated, would end up showing her art in Paris? I still can't quite believe it myself," Gwendolyn admitted. "None of this would have happened without you, Hunter. Your belief in me, your support." He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "No, love, I just recognized what was already there. The talent, the vision, the determination, those were always yours. I just had the good sense to see their value." Gwendolyn leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength that had been her anchor through years of change and growth. "Do you remember what you said that day in Thompson's store about my hands feeding you?" Hunter smiled at the memory. "I meant every word. I know you did. That's why I love you." She turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. But your hands have fed me too, Hunter, not just with the home you built or the life you provide, but with your touch, your support, your unwavering belief in me. In the silver moonlight, with the scent of pine and sage filling the air, Hunter pulled his wife into his arms. Then we'll keep feeding each other, he promised, for all the days we have, and they did. Through the birth of their son 2 years later, through the expansion of their ranch and Gwendolyn's growing recognition as an artist, through Helen's eventual marriage to the son of the gallery owner who had first recognized her mother's talent, through their golden years watching grandchildren play beneath the same mountains that had witnessed their love stories beginning. In time, Gwendolyn's tapestries hung in museums and private collections across America and Europe, celebrated for their unique vision of the American West. But her favorite pieces always remained at home. The mountain landscape with the lone rider that she'd been working on when she first met Hunter, the wedding tapestry that had hung behind the altar, and a small, simple piece she created on their 10th anniversary, showing their hands intertwined against a background of threads in every color imaginable. That piece hung in their bedroom until the end of their days, a reminder of hands that had always fed each other with love, with art, with a life woven together as intricately and beautifully as any tapestry.